Welcome to Iraqi Dinar News, where you receive real and authentic updates about the Iraqi dinar. If you want to stay informed with moment-by-moment developments, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Today's discussion focuses on a statement that has generated strong reactions among Iraqi dinar followers and currency observers worldwide. The statement suggests that after years of maintaining that there was no immediate need to increase the value of the Iraqi dinar or remove the 3 zeros from the currency structure, the Central Bank of Iraq may now be facing increasing pressure to strengthen the exchange rate from around 1,300 dinars per US dollar toward the 1,000 level. Supporters of this idea argue that such a move could potentially simplify future monetary reforms and make redenomination easier if Iraq eventually decides to restructure its currency system. Now, before analyzing this situation, it is important to separate confirmed economic policies from speculation and interpretation. At this moment, there has been ongoing public discussion inside Iraq regarding exchange rate stability, inflation management, banking reforms, and the purchasing power of Iraqi citizens. However, many interpretations circulating online often move far ahead of officially confirmed policy announcements. So in today's analysis, we will focus on what these discussions could realistically mean from an economic and financial perspective. For several years, the Iraqi government and the Central Bank of Iraq have worked to stabilize the national currency IQD, while balancing major economic challenges. Iraq remains heavily dependent on oil revenues, and fluctuations in global energy prices directly impact the country's fiscal strength, budget planning, and foreign currency reserves. During periods of economic pressure, Iraqi authorities have sometimes adjusted exchange rate policies in an attempt to manage liquidity, government spending, and inflationary conditions. The mention of moving from 1,300 to 1,000 dinars per dollar represents a significant potential strengthening of the Iraqi currency if such a policy were ever formally implemented. A stronger dinar could improve purchasing power for imported goods, potentially reduce inflationary pressure on consumer products, and increase confidence among parts of the Iraqi population who have faced years of economic uncertainty. Iraq imports a large amount of food, electronics, medicine, and industrial materials, so exchange rate stability remains critically important for everyday economic activity. However, strengthening a national currency is never as simple as changing a number on paper. Currency value reflects the broader health of the economy. It depends on factors such as productivity, foreign reserves, investor confidence, political stability, banking reform, trade balance, and the government's ability to sustain long-term fiscal discipline. This is why central banks generally move cautiously when discussing exchange rate reforms. The phrase, removing the 3 zeros, has been discussed in Iraq for many years. Economically, redenomination typically means simplifying a currency structure by replacing large nominal values with smaller ones. For example, instead of using 25,000 dinar notes, a country may eventually transition toward lower denomination notes and coins. This process is often done for accounting convenience, transaction efficiency, and psychological confidence in the national currency. It does not automatically create new wealth or instantly transform the economy. Many countries throughout history have carried out redenomination projects after periods of inflation or monetary restructuring. In successful cases, redenomination was supported by strong economic reform, controlled inflation, modernized banking systems, and stable governance. Without those foundations, redenomination alone has limited economic impact. This is why analysts continue to watch Iraq's broader reform efforts very closely. The Central Bank of Iraq has been focusing on several key priorities, including digitizing banking transactions, reducing dependence on cash, improving compliance with international banking standards, controlling black market currency activity, and strengthening relationships with global financial institutions. These reforms may appear technical, but they are extremely important because they build the infrastructure needed for long-term monetary stability. Another major factor influencing the Iraqi dinar is Iraq's foreign currency reserves. Over recent years, Iraq has benefited from periods of strong oil revenues, which helped increase reserve levels held by the central bank. Higher reserves provide stronger support for defending exchange rate stability because they give the central bank greater ability to manage market volatility and maintain confidence in the financial system. At the same time, Iraq still faces structural economic challenges. Unemployment, public sector dependence, infrastructure needs, political disagreements, and regional economic pressures all continue to influence the pace of reform. Investors and international observers generally look for consistency and predictability before expecting major currency adjustments. Short-term, discussions about a stronger dinar could increase speculation and public interest both inside and outside Iraq. Currency followers often react strongly to statements involving exchange rate changes or redenomination discussions. But realistically, meaningful currency reform usually happens gradually through coordinated economic policy, rather than sudden overnight shifts. If Iraqi authorities were to pursue a stronger exchange rate over time, they would likely prioritize maintaining economic stability first. Sudden or aggressive currency appreciation can create unintended consequences, including pressure on government budgets, export competitiveness, and domestic liquidity conditions. Central banks, therefore, tend to move cautiously and strategically. For Iraqi citizens, the immediate concern is often purchasing power and inflation. When the dinar weakens, imported goods become more expensive, affecting household budgets. A more stable or stronger dinar can help ease some of those pressures if supported by sound economic fundamentals. This is one reason why exchange rate policy remains such an important political and economic issue inside Iraq. For international IQD followers, this situation highlights the importance of focusing on verified developments rather than emotional speculation. The Iraqi economy is evolving, and there are legitimate reform efforts underway. But long-term currency strength depends on sustained institutional reform, private sector development, banking modernization, anti-corruption measures, and economic diversification beyond oil dependency. One of the most important long-term questions is whether Iraq can successfully transition toward a more diversified economy. Oil revenue remains the foundation of Iraq's finances, but economists often argue that long-term currency stability becomes stronger when economies expand manufacturing, technology, agriculture, logistics, and private enterprise. Diversification can help reduce vulnerability to oil price shocks and create more balanced economic growth. Another key development to monitor is the modernization of Iraq's banking system. International financial integration requires transparency, compliance, and efficient financial infrastructure. Iraq has been working to improve electronic payment systems and reduce reliance on cash-based transactions. These efforts may not receive as much attention online as exchange rate rumors, but they are often far more important in determining long-term monetary credibility. Global geopolitical conditions also matter. Iraq operates within a sensitive regional environment, influenced by international trade, energy markets, and global monetary trends. Decisions made by the U.S. Federal Reserve, fluctuations in global oil demand, and regional political developments can all indirectly affect Iraq's financial environment and exchange rate management strategies. From an analytical perspective, it is understandable why observers interpret discussions about moving toward the 1,000 level as preparation for future monetary restructuring. A lower numerical exchange rate could theoretically simplify accounting and reduce the complexity of large denomination currency use. However, any formal move toward redenomination or major exchange rate adjustment would require careful planning, public communication, and economic preparation. It is also important to remember that central banks often communicate cautiously to avoid market instability. Public statements may evolve over time as economic conditions change. That does not necessarily mean that dramatic currency events are imminent. Economic policy is constantly adjusted based on inflation, reserves, market demand, government budgets, and international financial conditions. For now, the broader picture suggests that Iraq continues moving through a long-term reform process aimed at strengthening financial stability and improving economic efficiency. Whether discussions surrounding the exchange rate eventually lead to major structural currency changes remains uncertain and will depend heavily on future economic performance and policy decisions. What investors, analysts, and Iraqi citizens should focus on most are measurable indicators: reserve growth, inflation trends, banking reforms, oil revenue stability, foreign investment activity, and institutional progress. These are the real foundations that determine currency confidence over time. As always, it is important to approach all Iraqi dinar news with patience, balance, and realistic expectations. Currency reform is typically a long-term economic process, rather than a single event. While developments surrounding the Iraqi economy remain important and closely watched worldwide, responsible analysis requires distinguishing confirmed policy from speculation and understanding the broader economic context behind every headline. Thank you for watching Iraqi Dinar News. If you appreciate responsible, factual, and balanced updates on the Iraqi dinar and Iraq's economy, make sure to subscribe to the channel and stay connected for future analysis. And as always, this content is provided for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered financial or investment advice.